So a big welcome to everyone. I am going to do a quick round of introductions for those who are going to be facilitating this meeting, and then we'll get right into it. So my name is Maggie Finkel-Acoyne. I'm with Living Lakes Canada. I am the program manager for the Southern Alberta Groundwater program. I'm very excited to chat and engage with you guys today. I will hand it over to my colleague, Anne-Marie.
Hi, I'm Anne-Marie. I'm with Living Lakes Canada. I'm the coordinator for the Alberta Groundwater program. And yeah, I'm very excited to have all you guys join us today. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'm based out of Lethbridge, Alberta.
Great. I'll hand it over to Emily.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Jerome, and I'm the Outreach and Communications Coordinator with Living Lakes Canada. And I'll be helping out with answering your questions in the chat and helping out with the activities as well today.
Great. Thank you, Emily. And finally, Shannon.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Shannon Frank. I'm the Executive Director of the Oldman Watershed Council based in Lethbridge.
Great. Thank you. So with that, Anne-Marie, I'll get you to advance a slide a couple there. And I will ask Shannon to give a land acknowledgement for us.
Thank you. The project we'll be talking about today takes place on Treaty 7 territory, which is the traditional territory of the Siksika or the Blackfoot Confederacy, Tsuut'ina Nation, Stoney Nakoda Nations, as well as the chosen home of the Foothills Métis District 1. Specifically within the Oldman watershed where we're working, we want to recognize the local Niitsitapi communities of Piikani and Kainai nations. We understand the special relationship that Indigenous peoples have to the lands and waters in the Oldman watershed, and we want to thank them for stewarding the watershed since time immemorial. Through this project, we aim to align our work with Indigenous water priorities.
Thank you so much, Shannon. So just a quick overview of the agenda today. We're inviting people to go ahead and introduce themselves in the chat. Then we're going to have a program/technical overview. There will be some time after that for a few questions from anyone in the crowd. Then we have a couple of activities. So we have what's called a values-based activity and a mapping activity that we'll get into. And then finally, we'll do a quick wrap up and talk about the next steps following this event. So I'm going to begin with an overview of Living Lakes Canada, as well as our Southern Alberta Groundwater Monitoring Program to set the context for this meeting. So Living Lakes Canada is a water stewardship NGO that was founded in the Canadian Columbia Basin in southeastern British Columbia. And we lead projects at a regional, provincial, and national level. And our mission is to facilitate collaboration in monitoring, restoration, and policy development initiatives for the long-term protection of lakes, rivers, wetlands, and watersheds here in Canada. We focus on bridging the gap between science and action to foster citizen-based water stewardship and collaborate with a wide range of interested parties to protect fresh water in a changing climate. So next, I'm just going to take a moment to touch on groundwater, as it's what we're going to be talking about today. So groundwater exists beneath our feet in many different aquifers, and aquifers are natural underground reservoirs within layers of sand, gravel, or rock. So not all aquifers are the same. Some store water for weeks, while others have stored it for decades, centuries, and even millennia. And many of these aquifers are connected to surface water, meaning that changes in groundwater may impact the quantity and quality of our surface water sources and vice versa. So if an aquifer is depleted, it could lead to lower water levels in nearby rivers. And likewise, if a river run dries, it can no longer recharge aquifers it's connected to. So I think it's just always a little bit helpful to kind of set those two pieces apart, the difference between ground and surface water. But the importance of groundwater is really, really crucial whenever it comes to being a source for domestic, agricultural, industrial, and commercial purposes. So it's connected to those surface waters. It helps us maintain, healthy water levels, and it is essential for maintaining healthy ecosystems, as well as habitat for fish, waterfowl, and wildlife. And careful management and allocation of groundwater is really becoming increasingly important as populations continue to grow. We see demand increases and pressures such as climate change intensify. And when it comes to groundwater, the expression that you can't manage what you don't measure is really relevant, since it's an unseen freshwater source. So here in Alberta, some 600,000 rural Albertans depend on groundwater, and meanwhile, levels in part of Alberta have reached record lows. Wells in Rocky View County, just outside of Calgary, for example, have shown steady declines in some of the lowest levels ever measured. And this drastic water supply shortage that is impacting Alberta over recent years has resulted in historical water sharing agreements to reduce water usage that cover each of the subbasins of the Red Deer River, the Bow River, as well as the main stem of the Oldman River and the upper tributaries. And I'm sure we don't need to tell you folks that within the Oldman watershed, many communities are experiencing severely low water levels. And a lack of understanding around groundwater systems is also a real challenge. So as we see an increase in droughts and floods and wildfires and lake temperatures and other climate impacts across Alberta, communities will need to increasingly explore how to adapt to changes and mitigate their risk. Water data that is gathered through monitoring and science-driven water stewardship help inform these processes of adaptation. So the work that Living Lakes and our partners are undertaking here in Alberta is based on our successful Columbia Basin groundwater monitoring program. So in the Columbia Basin, Living Lakes recognized that there was a need to create a bigger network of groundwater wells to increase groundwater level data and to expand monitoring to support sustainable water management in communities, and also increase the public awareness surrounding groundwater. And following the success, the Oldman Watershed Council invited our team to collaborate with them to help bring this methodology to the Oldman Watershed region for a 2-year pilot, which we are now rolling out. So the pilot program has 3 main objectives. 1, collect data and track groundwater levels to help understand seasonal and long-term trends. 2, increase groundwater knowledge using tools like outreach, education, and community engagement to involve locals in the water stewardship process and build up capacity to advocate for responsible water management. And 3, also share this data publicly for others to use. So we do this by sharing it on platforms where it is accessible not only to the public, but also for decision makers and researchers to use that data for freshwater studies and conservation. Getting into some of the specifics of how do we collect this data. So we use something that we call volunteer observation wells. These are already existing wells that we outfit with monitoring equipment through partnerships with landowners. And these wells then collect hourly groundwater level measurements to determine how groundwater levels change seasonally and from year to year. And this data can then be used to do a number of things, such as analyze and forecast water level trends, monitor changes in groundwater recharge and storage, monitor the effects of climate variability and groundwater withdrawals, understand groundwater surface water interaction, and also inform water management decisions and guide conservation actions. So a big topic of conversation in this region right now is obviously groundwater quality. And we know from working with Shannon and the Oldman Watershed that the importance of this topic cannot be understated for your communities. So I just want to touch on here that although our program isn't currently monitoring groundwater quality, we're looking at quantity. that information, groundwater quantity, can provide valuable insights that support understanding around groundwater quality. So changes in water levels can influence how contaminants move, how concentration occurs, and those groundwater surface water interactions are all really important to give us a more broader, holistic idea of what's happening to the health of the aquifer. So by integrating our data sets and others, we can develop a more complete picture of groundwater sustainability and resilience. And at this point, I would like to ask Shannon to share some of the insights here.
Thanks, Maggie. Yeah, there's two things that I want to discuss briefly. So the first one is, if you're a rural person, you can get your well or your water source tested for free through Alberta Health Services. And I really encourage you to do this because it not only helps you understand your drinking water, but it helps build that data set for the province so we can better manage the water sources. So we're going to share a link to the Alberta Health webpage, and you'll see on there you can test your water for bacteria 2 times each year, and that's recommended. And every 3 years you should test for chemicals and trace metals. And so you can do this through your local public health inspector. They will even give you bottles to use, and it's usually at the local health unit. If you're not sure who the person is in your region, it's at the link. I know in the Crow's Nest Pass, it's Wade Goen. I think Fort McLeod is Robert Rippin. Lethbridge area is Kristen Dykstra. So if you know those folks, you can reach out to them and get access to the bottles. The other thing I want to touch on is coal. Been getting a lot of questions about water quality and groundwater to do with coal. So unfortunately, there hasn't been studies about groundwater testing around coal sites, but there has been some for surface water. So you might have seen or heard about some of the recent Government of Alberta studies. They did find contamination downstream of Tent Mountain. So in the lake below that mine, there's about 185 micrograms per liter of selenium, which is the most significant element of concern. And then further downstream, in Crow's Nest Lake and into the Crow's Nest River, it was only 1.6 micrograms per liter, but that is getting close to the 2 micrograms per liter where fish start to be impacted and decline significantly. But that's surface water. We don't really know what's happening with groundwater. Similarly, at Grassy Mountain was part of this study. So both Blairmore and Gold Creeks were found to have levels of below 1 microgram per liter, so much lower than at Tent Mountain. So there is certainly some concerns there. Is it also in the groundwater? And we're just not sure. But groundwater and surface water are often connected, so it wouldn't be completely surprising to see some of those similar contaminants in groundwater.
Thank you, Shannon. And just a reminder, at the end, we'll have some space for questions as well. So moving on to thinking about how this program works. So there are a few steps to our program in the way it's implemented. Some of this work has been completed and some of it is now underway. So in the fall of 2024, we contracted Opus Petroleum to conduct an aquifer vulnerability assessment as well as a data gap analysis in the region. And this assessed the current network of groundwater monitoring wells, as well as groundwater licenses, geology, connection to surface springs, and biogeoclimatic zones within the watershed to provide recommendations for monitoring locations. This assessment provides us with the scientific context for our site selection of our monitoring wells. And now we are at the beginning stages of the community engagement phase with municipalities, First Nations, private well owners, and the general public. And this meeting right here is a great example of some of the engagements that we'll be continuing to run through in the coming months. So one of the many purposes behind this is to better understand the values and priorities and any potential concerns surrounding groundwater from those who are going to be the most impacted in the region, so the folks who live there. All of this community feedback will then be combined with our data gap analysis and aquifer vulnerability assessment and compiled into what we call a priority monitoring matrix. And this is going to guide the selection of the monitoring sites that's going to best address both the local priorities as well as the scientific questions efficiently. So at this time, we are planning on implementing 3 community clusters, and each cluster will consist of 3 separate volunteer observation wells, which will be outfitted with monitoring equipment in the fall of this year. And I just want to have a note here. So we don't do this work in silos. Like when we do the data gap analysis and we look at the work that's currently happening on the ground in Southern Alberta, we take into account those other initiatives, and where we can, we work to collaborate with those other bodies. And a really great example of this is the Alberta Geological Survey and their Southern Alberta groundwater evaluation, which I'm sure maybe some of you in the room are familiar with. So these studies are also really important in understanding groundwater and aquifers in the region, especially in the face of increasing demand for water. And they have their own set of priorities and initiatives that we are working to work kind of in tandem with. So while that study focuses on modeling aquifers and understanding those groundwater resources on a larger scale, we're looking localized at monitoring those aquifers. But in the end, it's hopeful that the improved access to groundwater data through all the initiatives will allow for decisions to be made faster and better within the region. So what is your role today? To participate in this process, you don't need to understand all the details of the data gap analysis, and our job is going to be to combine your feedback that you provide us with into the data gap analysis to create our priority monitoring matrix. But today, really, we're here to learn from you. So your feedback is going to directly contribute to the development of this program. So we want to select monitoring sites that respond to the local priorities and concerns. So there's a wide variety of information that we would be interested in, and we have some kind of examples up on the screen here. And I'm really hoping that this has given you a bit more context for the discussions that we will be having today. And with that, I'm going to open the floor for any questions, and we'll do our best to answer some. And we have about 10 minutes here for questions. You can feel free to both raise your hand or drop anything in the chat. Right, if we don't have any questions from the room, then maybe we'll move on to some of the activities that we have planned. So like I said, we have 2 activities that we're going to run through. Just our question slide. Oh, how do we get in touch to become a test site for our well? That's a really great question, Leona. So you can take our survey. We would encourage you to fill that out. In there, there's some information about volunteering your well. You're also able to send us an email at abgroundwater@livinglakescanada.ca. And we'll have all of that contact information on the final slide. And I think I see Emily is also in the chat there answering those questions, providing those links. Okay, any other questions before I hop into the activity here? Okay. So whenever we're considering monitoring locations, we really want to understand the types of questions that you have around groundwater in this region. Note that we can't necessarily answer all of the questions, but it helps us understand local concerns and priorities not only to determine where to focus our efforts, but also how we, report and communicate back out on this information. So we're going to share a link. There's a couple of options to engage with this activity. So we're going to share a link into the chat that will bring you to a Miro board where you can contribute to anonymously. I'm going to share my screen here so that you're able to see. Or if the link isn't the best fit for you, you can also drop the questions into the chat as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Anne-Marie, if you want to turn yours off. All right. Should all be able to share my screen. And let's make sure we have a few people coming in here. So once you're in the board, you're able to zoom in, click around. You can add your comments on some of the stickies that are already existing. We have a couple of themes set up. So if your questions relate to drinking water, so example, is there enough groundwater to meet my community's drinking water needs? We have also industry, economy, and jobs. Could groundwater shortage impact jobs and economic growth in our community? As well as ecosystem, freshwater health, agriculture, food security. And then other, not sure where your question belongs, you can put it here. So feel free to start to drop those questions in there. Anything that you might want answered around groundwater. Have a few people in here with me. Again, if the board isn't the best fit for you, you can also drop your questions into the chat as well. So we have, do you foresee gray water systems become more prevalent in rural and urban areas? Some good questions in here. I should mention also down below, we have a map for our next activity. If you are in the board, we'll get to the mapping activity after this one. You have, does agriculture water needs affect community drinking water? Great question. Will there be sufficient supply of groundwater to expand agricultural production and value added to ag businesses? Again, some really good questions and concerns coming up in here. So when we better understand where the priorities and values for the community is within kind of the topic of groundwater, we're able to select sites that hopefully have a better chance of answering some of these questions, which isn't to say that we'll be able to answer all of them, but it does help us start to get a good idea of what's important to community so that we can focus our efforts in that way. Some questions about how does fracking affect or not affect groundwater? Some questions coming in on the chat. Will there be sufficient supply of groundwater to expand agriculture project? Oh, that one ended up in there. Good questions. I'll give us another minute here. Some more kind of in the other categories. More great questions. Is there sufficient supply of groundwater to increase availability of potable water to Indigenous communities that are presently underserviced? Great question. How is land use affecting groundwater, especially recharge? A question here, how will you be incorporating data from the Alberta Groundwater Well Observation Network? Yes, so this was part of the data gap analysis, was looking at the data that's already readily available from the province's GOWN network, so the Government Observation Well Network. So we'll be considering that data and incorporating it into our work, especially as we get to the data analysis portion down the road. Gonna give it another couple of minutes here. We still got some people dropping some questions. Some pertinent questions about kind of ongoing community events, or not events, sorry, some ongoing operations within the community. So considering the data center plan near Pincher Creek, that is something that we're aware of. I think there's a need to have some more information around that particular initiative. Okay. This is great. This really starts to kind of fill out some of these questions. We've got a lot in the other category, which is good. Give everyone just one more minute here to finish out their thoughts. Will the recent announcement from the government of Alberta investing in groundwater research impact this project? What I can say here is it'll impact this project in that we're continuing to build relationships for our work. one of the things that we really strive to do is not to contribute to redundancies and do duplication of efforts. So we'll be coordinating as well with anyone else who's doing work within the region, so that we're making sure that the work that's being done regarding groundwater is done cohesively with all the parties that are involved. Okay. Feel free to continue to drop some more questions up here within this activity, but we are going to pop down a little bit into the next activity, which is our map-based activity. And at this point, if you're in the Miro board, you're simply going to go down a little bit and you're going to find a nice big map. So this is our mapping activity. So this is a chance for you to kind of drop on the map where you might have some concerns specific to an area. So again, we have the sticky notes that you're able to drag and drop into the area. The type of information that we're interested here is any specific locations that you would like us to monitor. Is there areas that you know are already being monitored, whether for groundwater or for surface water? Areas with significant groundwater use or potentially an increase in demand coming, areas with known groundwater shortages, areas with known surface groundwater connections, and include your name if you would like, especially if it might require us to follow up, but that is up to you guys. And you can just go ahead, grab one of these stickies, and you can just drag them and drop them to where you need them to be. And as people are working with this board, I do just want to take this opportunity and express my gratitude for folks engaging with us on this platform. Like this is a workshop space, and we really appreciate the effort that you're putting into the questions and comment and feedback. And I know sometimes these virtual rooms aren't always conducive to really great discussions, but already with these questions and the stuff coming in through the chat, it's really wonderful to see. So thank you so much for joining us and participating in this way. The map's moving around a little bit there. I'm just gonna lock that in place if I can. There we go.
Maggie, we have a comment from the crowd here, and Adele's asking, where's the first step to grabbing a sticky note? So maybe we can just speak to how to use this Miro board in terms of its functionality to help folks out.
Yes, thank you. So for grabbing a sticky note, you'll see like we have these, they're called these sticky tabs in the background. As I hover over with my hand, like a little hand comes up, you click on, you click on that hand and you've now got a sticky note attached. Once you drop it, double click onto the inside and you're able to put in your comments. This is one of the ways. If you need to delete, again, double click, it'll highlight your text. You can delete that way, as well as you'll see these three little bubbles and you should be able to delete it as well. And I apologize, some of my elements here should be locked. I'm not sure if this is our first time using the Miro board, so I also thank you guys for your patience with some of those features, but hopefully that helps with the stickies. Oh, yeah, we've got some things coming in here. So Oldman River near Summerview Feedlot. We've got a note here for the AI data center. runoff from the national parks. You see there's still some happenings up here, which is great as well. If anyone also, if you want to raise your hand, speak within the recording, I also encourage discussion that way as well. If anyone has any thoughts or concerns to share as we kind of go through here.
And just to clarify, we have another comment from the chat. In order to add stickies to the map, you have to click on the Miro hyperlink, and I'll add that again. Right now, we're just watching Maggie move around the map and navigate through the different comments. So make sure you click on the link if you want to be navigated to the map and add it yourself. Otherwise, feel free to add your points into the chat and I'll add them in there for you.
Thank you, Emily. I just giving a bit of a bird's eye view on all the happenings here. We have a few comments on the map. I encourage people drop pins where or notes where it feels like you might have an area of concern or something to say. You know, we're interested in any histories even that you have regarding the Oldman watershed, whether it's previous extreme events, anything like that. You folks have the local knowledge within that area that we're hoping to tap into. So there's no comment too small or anything like that. Please feel free to share if you're open to it. I have a few more questions. Groundwater surface water interface. So we have lots of partners that are working with us on this project. So BGC Engineering has some hydrogeologists that we're working with, and there's an aspect of some aquifer mapping that's going to be taking place within the community cluster areas. If you're interested in having some contacts for that, please reach out. We'd be happy to point you in the direction of some of our project partners that we know of. As I see like some of these general some general questions, you know, can water move between aquifers and a few other pieces of, you know, the groundwater surface water relation. Like I mentioned, this is one of our this is the beginning of our community engagement phase. And one of the things that we will be doing through the summer going into the fall is offering some trainings, offering some more workshops where there's the opportunity to learn more about groundwater. As we install monitoring equipment, we'll be working with volunteers that all of you are more than welcome to sign up for, to look at how we perform those site visits for our monitoring wells and learning a little bit more about the groundwater space. Got creeks and streams near shell plants and other areas where cattle are grazed. So definitely we've got a lot of feedback kind of in this southwest corner. a great comment right there. There's some issues with unauthorized dumping by recreation vehicles and parks. Up here near High River, the impact of feedlots. Near Lethbridge. Does Lethbridge have significant groundwater sources? Right. I'll give us about 5 more minutes here with the board, and I'll leave this board up for a little bit longer so that you guys all have time. Like, the link will remain live for a little bit longer so that you guys all have time to make sure that you're able to contribute your thoughts and feedback into the conversation here. Got impact of more housing, including higher north, such as Okotoks. So some potential impacts there with higher demands. Got some more information about the data center. Lee Lake. Starting to see a good amount of spread here throughout the area. I think this is from Shannon here. So we have done a groundwater study in the upper Little Bow subbasin. There has also been an increased in approvals adjacent to upstream Twin Valley Reservoir. Oh, from Shirley Pickering. Thank you, Shirley. There's some concerns have been raised about the impact of groundwater interactions with surface water. That's great information, Shirley. Thank you for sharing this. So a good thing for us to kind of mention here. So as I said during the short little technical presentation and overview, we'll be installing 9 volunteer observation wells that will be dispersed kind of in 3 community clusters. And there's a few reasons to do community clusters. What we didn't want to do, and this was kind of a lesson learned from actually our work in the Columbia Basin, was instead of putting, 1 volunteer well within an area, that's great. It improves the level of data that is accessible, but it's one kind of spot. And because groundwater is an unseen resource, it can be difficult to understand whether what's happening in that one spot is unique to it, or if there is trends within the general area. So This is a starting point. It's a 2-year pilot. We'll be continuing to operate this network many years into the future. And hopefully, as you know, our resources and capacity increase, we'll be able to also grow this network of wells to continue to provide more information to communities. And a really great comment here. So community engagement is an important part of building momentum when it comes to understanding sources. How do we find out about potential issues such as proposed industries using potentially contaminating water? I think this is a really great point. Community engagement is really an important part of building this momentum. We don't want to do our work kind of in a vacuum. We want to make sure that the community is engaged, and many hands makes light work, right? So as we all get involved in these really popular or important, conversation topics, it helps with the bigger goal. Interesting one here. The role of culverts and pipelines changing groundwater movement. Interesting. So we've got comment here, Northback insists there's no hydrological connection between the grassy mountain pit ponds and ground or surface water. Is this claim substantiated through studies or monitoring? Some really great questions to be answered through here. Shannon, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to this. I know that you're a little bit more aware of the studies and work being done in that area or having been done in the past.
No, there's not studies proving that. I think that's kind of their goal, but I think it would be very tough to, any sort of tailings pond is going to interact with surface and groundwater. It's pretty tough to stop that, as we've seen in northern Alberta and in the Elk Valley, where there is other coal mines. So for example, a Government of Alberta study found downstream of the McLeod River watershed, that's upstream of Edson in the Athabasca, that the concentrations there have been decreasing since 2005, but they still exceed guidelines at about 5 to 10 micrograms per liter, and that's with ongoing reclamation. So I don't think there's any studies showing that it's completely possible to separate tailings ponds from groundwater and surface water.
Thank you, Shannon. So as we come up here to the 10 minutes to mark, like I said, this link will remain active. You guys can continue to put in your thoughts. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and maybe we'll just move into the next steps. You know, where do we go from here? What is our big kind of end picture when it comes to our project? But please feel free to continue to engage with the board. And I'm just going to stop my share here. We had our our map activity. So this says thank you. We're by no means we're not getting you guys to head out just yet, but I did just want to, as people still pluck away, we also have a QR code with a survey that folks are welcome to complete. This is one that's already been circulated. So if you've already done it, fantastic. If you haven't, this is a really great chance to have your voice heard. If you're a well owner and you're interested in potentially being considered for one of the volunteer observation wells, this survey is a really great starting point for providing us with some of that information. We'll be starting the site selection process going through late spring, early summer with installs happening in the fall. So please feel free to complete that survey and also get a hold of us that way. So now, as we kind of get to the next part of this project, so we've been hosting some of these community engagement meetings. We'll be reviewing all the information that's gathered through these meetings and surveys. So from each location, you may hear from us again for one-on-one discussions, for follow-up if needed. And if you have any additional ideas or priorities to share later on, you're also more than welcome to reach out to our team and have some more discussions. So all of this is going to hopefully feed into our priority monitoring matrix, along with the results of the data gap analysis and our aquifer vulnerability assessment. And then we're going to begin the selection for sites that we'll be monitoring.